Caustics are a form of global illumination, and what caustics are is basically the focusing of light. So light is refracted or reflected by objects and create light patterns on other objects, and it's actually this light pattern that we call caustic lighting. So an example of this would be a magnifying glass that focuses sunlight to a spot. That hot white spot is known as caustic light. So mental ray treats caustics separately from global illumination, and that's mainly for performance reasons. But it does work the same way. So that means it's a photon tracing technique where it requires a light that emits photons, and it's these photons that bounce around the scene and actually get reflected and refracted off different objects, and then they finally settle and create the caustic lighting effect. So the setup is very similar to GI, except when we're doing caustics, we want to keep it very local to certain objects that are involved in the caustic lighting effect. So in this case, we've got a glass object that's sitting on a table, and we just want to set the caustics flags for these two objects and not worry about everything else to kind of save on performance. So with the glass object selected, we're going to go on the visibility flag and turn on caustic transmission for that object. For the table, we're going to turn it on for caustic receiving. Next, we want to go on the light, and on the shader, there's a photon tab where we want to enable the caustic flag. I'm just going to pin that down. Last thing we need to do is to enable caustics for the region. So on the photon tab, enable caustics. And we don't see result yet because I need to increase the intensity of my caustic. So I'm going to bring that up to 1,000,000. And there we start seeing the caustic lighting effect. What we want to do now is go to our glass object, and actually on the shader, what we want to do is edit the index of refraction. So the index of refraction is going to control how much the light bends as it enters the surface. So as I bring this up, you'll see we'll start focusing the light a little bit more and getting a sharper caustic pattern. So normal glass is about 1.52, so we're going to set it to that just to get a realistic type of effect. So there we go. We can just punch up the effect by setting the intensity to 2,000,000. And like global illumination, we can set the energy of the caustics here. So if we want to do special effect, we can set the actual caustic lighting to be different than the actual light color. And that's good if you actually want to have your glass surface tinted a certain color and the actual caustic reflect that tinting. But I'm just going to set the actual caustics the same as the light color for more realism. And we have this flag at the bottom where we can actually use the light color as energy just to match the colors up. So what I'm going to do is we're going to bring down the number of caustics to something like 100 just so we can look at the actual mechanism caustics uses to work. So over on the render options or region options, we have a few more settings for caustics. We've got the radius. So right now the radius is being set by the scene dimension. So mental ray will actually determine every circle we see here is basically the area it's looking up for photon information. So a photon map is calculated, and then we look into that map and actually we take a sample at a certain spot and look in a certain radius to see if there's photons in that area. So right now mental ray is setting that by default. It's usually about 1/10 the scene kind of dimensions. So if I increase the radius here, you can see we're picking up more photons. So we're actually increasing the lookup area that we have for gathering photons. So as I bring that up, we're looking in a larger area for photons, so it's getting a little bit more of an accurate picture. The issue is that we're looking in that certain area, so we're also just creating a blurred map. So you're getting kind of a softer effect. So the trick is to keep the radius small enough that picks up accurate kind of photon information, but it's not too large that it's actually blurring out the actual look of the caustics. You've also got this option for filtering. So a box filter will just, from the sample point, it will evenly sample that radius for photons. So you get a flat look here. If we go to say like a cone type filter, it's going to weight the photons that are closer to the sample point with a higher value. So at the center, you're going to get the photons having a stronger value. And as you go to the edge of the radius, the photons there have less strength. So you get a weaker representation. So that kind of works good for caustics because it'll actually concentrate the caustic pattern a little more. So what we want to do to actually get a decent look, because obviously what we have right now is just a rough kind of approximation, we want to start bringing up the number of photons. So let's go to about 3800. So you can see we're filling out the caustic look. I'm just going to keep my radius down at 0 right now and let mental ray figure out the radius. So there we go. What I'm going to do is keep increasing the number of photons. Let's go to near 20,000. So you can see we're getting a fairly accurate picture of the caustics. And normally what you want to do if you want to get the most accurate picture is just increase the number of photons considerably, and then you can adjust the accuracy and radius to kind of sample that photon map. So what I'm going to do is go here, go to about 70,000. So there you can see we're getting a fairly smooth effect, but there is still quite a bit of gradation, more in the remote areas of the caustic effect where it's falling off. It's still a bit grainy. So what we can do is start increasing the radius. But what's been done now is we basically created the photon map with 80,000 photons. The map's been created. What we can do is turn off the rebuild. And in this way, we're not recomputing the photon information. It's kind of cooked in this map that mental ray can just look up and actually sample. So all the information is there at a high level. And what we can do is play with these settings now. And you can see we're getting very quick feedback, and we're not having to recompute the photon map. So what we want to do is make sure we're sampling in the radius enough to get all the photon information. So as I bring this up, you can see as I'm bringing it up, it's not helping anymore. We're still having this grainy look. So we know that at about, looks like at about 100, we're getting still a fairly accurate picture. Let's go to 120 just to be safe, because I notice a bit of graininess there that's smoothed out. And now what we want to do is increase the radius that we look for those photons. So you can see right away we've smoothed out a lot of the noise because we're looking in a larger area in the photon map, and we're smoothing that result. So there we go. And we might actually be better off with a kind of a box filter in this case. You can see it's a little bit smoother, and let's increase the radius a little bit more at about 5. Okay, and I'd say that's pretty good rendering of the caustic effect. And because we've kind of cooked the photon map, you can see as I orbit around and manipulate, the photon map's computed, the lookup is very quick, and we can render out this caustic effect fairly quickly. The only thing is if this actual glass object is animated over time or the floor, you're going to have to rebuild the map at each frame. So that does take more time. But in cases where there's no animation, this is the way to go. So that, very quickly, is how caustics work in XSI.